Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into a case study that is, frankly, pretty alarming. We're going to unpack exactly how an ultra-rich superpower stumbled into an absolutely unbreakable economic trap, and more importantly, what developing nations desperately need to learn from it. You know, this isn't some ancient history about a distant empire falling in a world war. No, this is a modern-day look at how just three major policy decisions, combined with an invisible market force, can bring an entire nation to its knees. It's really astounding when you contrast a historic empire that literally wrote the rules of global trade with today's reality. I mean, historically, Britain pioneered the steam engine, industrial banking, the modern stock exchange. They were making 20% of everything on Earth. But fast forward to today, that exact same country is dealing with stagnant salaries, bankrupt local councils, and a political system so fractured it has burned through 6 prime ministers in just 9 years. It's wild.
So, to make sense of this massive shift, we're going to cover 5 key things: the fall of a superpower, how bond markets actually rule the world, the economic doom loop, Britain's fractured politics, and finally, what this means for India's future. Let's get right into it.
Part 1. The fall of a superpower. Let's look at how Britain lost its economic footing over a highly volatile 6-year window.
As you can see here, 3 massive blows combined to basically shatter the UK economy. It started back in 2016 with Brexit. Britain instantly lost duty-free, paperwork-free access to 250 million European customers, which obviously drove up costs for exporters. Then, boom, 2020 hits. COVID forces the government into massive, unprecedented borrowing. And just as they were trying to catch their breath, the 2022 Ukraine war triggered sanctions that sent energy prices absolutely through the roof.
And the scale of the fallout here is just staggering. Public debt literally doubled from just 50% of GDP in 2008 to more than 100% in 2020. This mountain of new debt completely flipped the power dynamic in the country, which perfectly sets the stage for the next major force we need to talk about.
Which brings us to Part 2, how bond markets rule. Let's dive into the invisible hand that actually controls this mounting national debt.
So we all vote for politicians to form the visible government, right? But the really fascinating part is that there's this invisible government of bond vigilantes, and they exercise immense power through something that sounds incredibly boring: interest. See, when a government doesn't collect enough taxes to pay its bills, it issues bonds. They're essentially just promises to pay back a loan with interest over time. But these bonds don't just sit in a dusty vault somewhere. They're actively traded all day long.
Now, when traders start dumping government bonds in the secondary market, the price drops and the yield spikes. This forces the government to pay billions extra just because investors sold a piece of paper. Let me break that down. Say a £100 bond pays £5 a year. That's a 5% yield. But if investors panic and sell that same bond for £50, it still pays £5 a year, which means the effective yield just shot up to 10%. Because the government is constantly borrowing new money, they have to match that new 10% yield on all new loans or no one will buy them. Just like that, borrowing costs the country billions more.
So this math leads us to a stunning historical question. How on earth does a bond yield mechanism actually unseat a world leader? Well, to answer that, we just have to look back to September 2022.
When Prime Minister Liz Truss announced a massive, debt-fueled tax cut, the bond vigilantes completely lost it. They violently dumped UK bonds. They saw a government cutting taxes without cutting any spending, meaning all £45 billion would have to be borrowed. The markets absolutely panicked. Yields on long-dated government debt spiked from 3.5% to over 5% in just days. The pound crashed so hard that the Bank of England had to make a dramatic emergency intervention just to stop the country's pension funds from completely collapsing.
And the fallout? In just 49 days, the brutal mathematics of the bond market forced her resignation. She was famously outlasted by a live-streamed head of lettuce. The invisible government didn't have to protest in the streets with signs. They simply sold their bonds, and the prime minister was gone.
All right, Part 3, the economic doom loop. Now, you might think markets keeping a reckless government in check is just a perfectly functioning system, but let's explore how it actually locked Britain into a terrifying trap.
The exact same traders that punished Truss are now trapping the UK in what economists call a doom loop. Because the UK already has this massive mountain of debt from Brexit, COVID, and the energy shocks, the bond market is incredibly nervous. They are constantly demanding higher yields just to keep lending the country money.
And this brilliantly illustrates the unbreakable cycle. Every time the interest bill grows, vital public services get starved, and traders get even more nervous. To pay the rising interest, the government literally has to borrow more money. That bigger debt means there's less money for essential things like schools, healthcare, and local councils, many of which, by the way, are going bankrupt right now. As the debt grows, yields rise further and the loop tightens with every single turn.
So Britain is effectively frozen between two locked doors. They can't invest their way out, and they can't cut their way out without triggering a voter revolt or even more economic collapse. If they try door one and borrow to invest, the bond market spikes yields and crushes them. If they try door two and slash spending while jacking up taxes, it kills the economic growth they desperately need to generate tax revenue in the first place. They are completely, totally stuck.
Moving to part 4, Britain's fractured political system. To make matters even worse, the UK can't just easily legislate its way out of this trap because its political immune system is completely broken.
For about 300 years, British politics was a straightforward two-party contest. But look at this incredibly tight five-way split from recent election cycles. All 5 major parties are sitting within 10 points of each other. Not a single one of them commands even a 30% vote share.
The danger here is huge. In a deeply fractured field, winning candidates lack a true mandate. That paralyzes the government's ability to pass the strong, painful recovery policies required to escape the doom loop. With a first-past-the-post voting system, a 5-way split means a politician can take office while the vast majority, say 75%, of their constituents actively voted against them. It creates a government with no real public backing, which makes it impossible to make those tough economic calls.
Finally, part 5, lessons for India's future. What's really crucial about this explainer is how we can use these British missteps as a vital cautionary tale for developing economies like India. Look at the UK's approach. They targeted wealthy foreign investors with new taxes, and guess what? The investors just left. Take a hypothetical businessman, let's call him Dimitri. Under the old rules, if he earned $1 million locally and $20 million abroad, he was only taxed on the local $1 million. This brought billionaires to London. But when the government abolished this to chase short-term tax revenue, it totally backfired. India, on the other hand, is currently focusing on building a wealth creation ecosystem, using startup incentives and huge initiatives like Gift City to attract that capital.
This single number right here, 16,500, represents the largest single-year outflow of millionaires ever recorded. It completely proves that taxing the wealthy for political points often results in a massive loss of jobs, spending, and investment confidence. The UK government thought they'd raise billions on paper. Instead, they lost the exact capital they needed to grow. The lesson is simple. When you tax the highly mobile wealthy, they don't stick around to pay it. They pack their bags.
So here are the core strategic takeaways we really need to grasp. Protect the wealth ecosystem, reform broken voting systems, and absolutely prioritize aggressive investment in human capital. If an emerging economy taxes its rich just for quick votes without a way to replace that capital, it's an economic bloodbath. And if a divided population is misrepresented by an outdated voting system, strong governance is basically impossible.
But this is perhaps the most alarming parallel of all. Just like the UK, India has a massive interest burden that threatens to crush its ability to invest and grow into a truly rich country. Right now, India currently spends more on national debt interest payments than it does on defense, education, and healthcare combined. If a developing nation can't prioritize education and healthcare, it will never build a foundation to escape its own national debt. The interest payments will literally just eat the future alive.
So I'm going to leave you with this final thought to ponder. If the world's most experienced democracy couldn't escape this doom loop, will emerging nations adapt in time to avoid the exact same fate? The bond market doesn't care about your history, and the doom loop certainly doesn't play favorites. The rules of wealth creation and economic stability are totally unforgiving. The next few years are going to reveal exactly who was paying attention. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning the systems around you.